Hey everybody, Hugh here. Welcome back. I'm in the courtyard area and you can see it's looking very nice in the background there, even though it is in January. Waiting on the bulbs to come up, which I'm sure they will in their own time. There are some green shoots showing. In the meantime, some gardening tasks to do today. Well, I mentioned about doing the garlic last week, so I'm going to pot more garlic, cloves, and I got some broadbeans during the week, so I'm going to sow them too. And a few other tasks, so let's see what we get up to today. So in the middle of, or just about to sow some broadbeans, you can see here, if I can get my finger in the right way, that's the compost I'm using. So that's old compost that's taken out of some of the 2021 containers. I think it's from the dahlias mostly, and maybe some of the old tomato containers, along with one or two of the flower planters. So when you're reusing compost like this, there's a couple of things to watch out for. Obviously it's exhausted of nutrients, particularly if tomatoes have been in there, because they are such hungry feeders. And then just keep an eye out for any old roots and old debris, which I have put into the mushroom tray in the back there. You know, just clumps of roots that I found. And of course, my old friends, the slugs, baby slugs, and any snails as well. They have to be located elsewhere, shall we say. So they are mushroom trays that I'm using. I have filled them with compost from here, and even you'll see that there's a bag there right beside it which has a mixture from last autumn of my reused compost, topsoil and manure. So it's a slightly richer mix. So I'm putting the basic mix down the bottom of the tray, like you can see there. I've left that one unfilled. Mixed in plenty of bone meal and some of the seaweed fertilizer, so mix that through. Of course I have the gloves on top there to remind you to make sure that when you're handling items like this that you do wear gloves. The trowel is there, so that mixes it into the compost mix, the old compost mix that's there. I've put some of the fresher compost mix then on top, and I've seen the seeds here, and each of those seeds then are going to be put down, I'd say about an inch thereabouts, maybe an inch and a half. What's that in centimetres? 3 centimetres, 4 centimetres, because the seeds are quite big, so they'll come up well through them. Once they're sown, I'll be putting, for here, to try and keep mice and other unwelcome visitors away, I'll be putting some chicken wire over the tops of them. And then to start them off, I'll show you where I'll place them a little bit later on. But fairly easy to do, and in no time they'll be shooting through, and we'll see what we'll do then. So that's the sowing of broadbeans. So there we are, the broadbeans, label in place, and of course chicken wire over the top. And when you are putting chicken wire or similar in place, make sure you're just careful, because obviously you can cut yourself, so a stout pair of gloves is always helpful. And that's not to say the mice will be kept off them. I'm just hoping they will. I know one of my fellow YouTubers, Terry King, has problems with mice, and he's a couple of tips and hints over on his channel too, so they're worth checking out. But let's see how we go with these. And here we have some of the extra garlic being sown. As we talked about last week, there's about 10 plants I think inside the glass house at the moment that's sprouting away, and that'll provide more than enough garlic I think for us to use here. However, I was asking, should we sow some more that we can give away as presents and that people might use. So I've started that process. Again, we've used these mushroom trays that a friend of mine gave me from a restaurant, and you can see I filled it again with that spent compost that you see from the container. Mostly I think from dahlias, maybe a little bit from old tomatoes and other flowers that have been grown. I've enriched it with some of that bone meal and a little bit of seaweed fertilizer just to enrich it up a bit, and then you can see the garlic cloves. I've already done 2, You can see this one here is done. You can just about see the green tips there poking up. And this one, I made sure you could see the green tips because the garlic itself, the cloves themselves are actually sprouting. And then this one here, you can see I'm just in the process of starting to plant. So you can see you really just plant them up to their neck there. Now garlic, when you're doing them, typically it's October, November, so it is late for me doing them now. So they will be inside in maybe the greenhouse or the cold frame, somewhere coolish but not, sorry, warmish but not too warm, just to get the root system going on them. They do benefit from a cold spell. So the idea of getting them growing in the early winter, the late autumn or early winter, and then exposing them to some cold, and that helps the bulbs split into cloves. So I'm taking a chance here with these that we will get a cold spell in, you know, they grow for the rest of January and maybe the middle of February. And the ones even I have in the glass house, I'll be putting outside to give them, you know, exposed to a cold spell. Otherwise they just end up as round cloves or round bulbs of garlic rather than cloves. Not that that's a problem, they can still be used. There are some, or should I say some, there are plenty of garlic cloves left over. So they are sprouting away, and it's always tempting to run and plant loads, but as I said before, we only need a certain amount, and then we're doing a certain amount for presents. Brian, if you look at the comments on last week's video, thanks very much Brian, he had a great tip on freezing garlic. He uses them in ice cube trays. He freezes them in ice cube trays, and he says he has a special ice cube tray especially for it, so he doesn't mix them up with his normal ice cubes. So that was a great tip indeed, and so I'll do that with some of the leftover garlic that we have here. So there we go, planting some garlic cloves in midwinter, and we'll see where we go from here with them. Next task on the list is getting rid of some of these containers of compost. These were the containers that we used here last year for our one truss tomatoes. So you can see the leftovers of the tomato stem there, and the compost. Now that compost at the time was made up of 1/3 old compost from here, 1/3 topsoil and 1/3 manure. So even though the tomato plants would have drained it of a lot of its nutrients, the likes of that manure would still be breaking down over winter. So there would still be nutrients actually in there, and it's good enough to reuse when I'm doing other projects that don't involve the same type of plants as the tomatoes or from the same family, I think. So it involves having less disease. So for the likes of repotting dahlias maybe, or even some bedding as part of the compost mix, it'd be quite a useful resource, and means I'm not having to go out and buy lots and lots more compost. I will still of course have to buy more topsoil and bagged manure for my mixes, but this is going to save me having to go and buy bags of you know, the sort of avoiding as much as possible the bags of peat-based compost and that as well. So that's the next task. It's part of the clean up and tidy up that we have here, because believe you me, there's plenty to go on. You can see there's more of those mushroom trays that were washed last autumn, blue and black. That bottle that you see in the corner is not my secret stash of rum. Those of you that have watched 2 years ago, that is my tomato bottle, and that'll need to be cleaned out and prepared for this year. And you can see I've got a couple of small little conifers in pots. I have about 6 or 8 of those. I got them a few years ago, and they're actually still growing despite being neglected, and the idea of making some bonsai plants out of them at some stage was the plan. I'm not quite sure what I'll do with them now, but I should decide if they're going to be planted out, or even if I cut the pots down themselves halfway, they could make for a nice display of small little dwarf conifers come bonsai plants. If you have any thoughts, do let me know. But in the meantime, we're going to get cracking and emptying these and processing the leftover containers then. So continuing sort through with the compost, old compost. Sorry, I'm catching my breath here because we've been working hard. The tomato pots that I was showing you a few minutes ago on video have now all been emptied, and the compost has been put into some bags and containers like this for use when I'm potting up and repotting some of the shrubs we have in pots and that sort of thing. And now this is where my compost bin goes. I've lifted off the compost bin and in the process of taking out the compost, which is here, I'm putting it into some bags that we have. So yeah, just sorting through, taking out the better part of the compost, and any of the debris that still hasn't broken down or is in the process of breaking down is going to go back into the compost bin here. What I do want to do is put some chicken wire underneath the compost bin area, just to ensure we're not getting any of our friends coming up through the base, which I suspect they've been around and about. So I just want to put chicken wire, a couple of layers of chicken wire underneath the base. Thankfully they haven't nested in the compost bins, which is sometimes what we hear people talk about, but just to be doubly sure. Now of course rats of course can eat through concrete, they can eat through wire and that if they really want to, but we're going to discourage them as much as possible. What I have found, and if you look back at some of my old videos, you'll see where I was trying these. They were advertised, coffee capsules being advertised as compostable. So they've been in there for about a year now, and they're not composting at all. So they're going to just be thrown into the bin, which is a pity. You'd like to see things being as compostable as possible. And as I say, bin will go back in here. We'll have some nice compost taken out for some of our potting and growing items, particularly the likes of tomatoes and potatoes will be what I'll use this compost for as part of a compost mix, and the rest will go back in to break down some more, and of course it'll be added to from now on, and particularly as we go through the spring and the weeds begin to arise and all sorts of things like that. Now, there we go. Area sorted. We got 3 bags, well, 2 of that bags that size, fairly full with good compost from the compost bin, and then this giant potato bag here is filled as well. So that's if they were, what would they be, 40-50 litre bags, and that is probably 80 litres thereabouts. I'm not quite sure, but even if we were taking a broad slab, it's about 120-140 litres of compost from the compost bin, and that's comprised of debris going in from the garden, kitchen waste, and of course some of the compost that I've emptied from pots back in there, all cooking away over winter to give us this mix. And what's left over here at this point, the unbroken down stuff, is going to go back in, and we have another compost bin inside from the house to add to that. Plus, once we begin weeding and tidying some of these pots, all of that stuff will go in, and we'll bin these old coffee pods. There's a few of them around. You can see some more there in the bottom left corner. Sorry, bottom right corner. And there are some trays we were using under pots last year. I think they're recycled sandwich trays we picked up somewhere, but that has some dirty water. Dirty, smelly water, I think is the word you'd use. But that'll be great stuff to throw in on top of this stuff here. Now it's time for a cup of tea. Another task ahead, as well as doing some tidying in the courtyard area. You can see our little mini greenhouse. It started with a small cut. What's that song go? It started with a small cut I never thought, no, ignore that. It started with a small cut, and then on one of the windy autumn days, or two of the windy autumn days, the wind just got in and just blew it complete to pieces. Now we have another cover that we sourced online, well done, but it's looking a bit of a mess, and the salvia and the passion flower that are inside, along with some of the alpine saxifrages, are looking a lot worse for wear since you've had those very cold nights, so we'll tend to that. First of all though, I'm just going to go over and show you the snug area that we made last week in the glass house for some of the seeds and seedlings in the spring. Meanwhile, in the glass house, the snug area I was talking about last week has been created, and you can see it there. It's basically a warm box inside the glass house, so the intention is to use that for seeds and seedlings in the spring when the proper time comes to sow them, so it'll be an extra warm area and hopefully light and bright as well inside the glass house. So we'll see how we go with it, and you can see the broadbeans are inside it just to get them started a wee bit. They won't stay in there too long because I don't want them coming up too quickly, because they are tough plants, so they will grow very quickly if they're kept too warm, so I want them growing slower and stouter. But I'll start them off in there, and I have another lid just there to put up on top, which is great. So I just wanted to show you that's the snug area. So when you hear me talk about the snug area in the glass house, that's what I'm talking about. I got some more fleece during the week. You can see we stopped off at a garden centre, and they were selling the industrial grade stuff. It was $1.50 a metre, so it was very good. And you can see the difference between the stuff underneath, which is the lighter, and the heavier commercial stuff. And meantime, to the front there you can see the garlic is sprouting, and the bulb pots that we did. And yes, I'm not sure who said it to me about putting in some proper labels. Those cards are stuck in pots. They add a bit of colour for this time of year, but we do have to write proper labels over the next couple of weeks and put them in, because those cards do not last as labels. So if they write proper ones in pencil, I find lasts the best. Anyway, we'll crack on with doing a tidy over, finishing the mini potager area, tidying over the courtyard, and I'll come back and I'll say farewell for the day. As always, thank you very much for all the chats and the comments, and of course any of the helpful hints or tips that you have there. And I know people have been thanking me for tips and hints here too, so it's always good to share. Of course, do make sure that you hit that like button, which helps with the YouTube algorithms apparently, and if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe below. And of course, until next week, all the best for now. Take care. Bye bye.